Welcome to Journey with Lay podcast. We discuss leadership, culture, and how to take your business to new heights. Your host, Lay Wang, is an adventurer, motivational speaker, and executive coach. Join us each week to learn how you and your team can reach your highest aspirations. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hey everyone, welcome to Journey with Lay Leadership Podcast. This is a place where purpose-driven leaders come to learn how to step into that authentic leadership role that resonates with their hearts and souls. I'm your host, Lay Wan. As an adventurer, motivational speaker, and executive coach, I believe if you dare to dream it, you can achieve it. Join me every week to learn how you can reach your highest aspirations while living an exciting and balanced life, so you can take your team and business to new heights with ease and grace. Now, let's welcome our amazing guest today, Nate Thompson. Nate is a passionate and a dynamic transformation leader with 20 years of experience across 4 industries. Nate is an award-winning catalyst and healthy disruptor who leads with humility and inspiration to help people achieve their potential while creating the futures of their organization. In the community, Nate has spent the last 13 years leading domestic and international youth leadership programs. Nate holds a master's degrees in organizational leadership, strategic innovation, and change. Hi, Nate. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
And you know what's the opening question? I read in your bio, you said you fell in love with transformation during the toughest time in your life.
Yes.
So I'm curious, what was that story? When was that? What was happening?
Yes, it was early in my life. I would call it a life collapse and a pressure cooker. The short version of the story is I was graduating from high school. I just finished my first year of college and I was playing football. And I was in Kansas at a Fort Hays State University. And I realized I didn't want to be that version of myself anymore. I'd grown up playing sports and I thought I was going to continue to play sports. But as I was getting older, I was not in love with it anymore. And I dropped out and I went home and told my dad, I'm done playing football and I don't want to play it anymore, which I think kind of broke his heart. And I went to another school. Just the dropout part, I think, was really hard for me. Plus, quitting football at the same time was really hard. And then I went to school with some friends of mine I went to high school with. And they asked me to go play in a basketball tournament one weekend. And I didn't go, I had to work. They went to the basketball tournament and they decided to drink and drive. And on the way home, they rolled the car and they were both killed. And we buried them on Christmas. So there was this very kind of disruptive period of I dropped out of college. I stopped playing sports. My friends passed away and I wasn't handling all of that well. And I went out one night and met someone, had a one-night stand and had an unplanned pregnancy. And then in March of that next year, so all this is happening in a fast kind of sequence. In March of the following year, my 16-year-old brother got his driver's license, went to a movie in a nearby town, and the storm rolled through. On the way home, he rolled his car and had 3rd-degree brain damage and traumatic brain injury, TBI.
Oh my God.
So all of these, I was like normal kid, and then a sequence of events just sort of stacked on one another. And I would say it just sort of collapsed my life in that everything that I thought was my life and who I was in this world was sort of over. And I had to reinvent. And so without going into more of this story, a friend just called me and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" He had gone to the Navy. He was out in San Diego and he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm drowning. I'm kind of lost right now." And he goes, "Well, come to San Diego and, get a fresh start." And I went to San Diego and I went to a bookstore that was called Bookstore Star at the time. It was in La Jolla, California. And I walked into the self-help aisle and just started looking for something that could help me figure out how to get out of this hole. And I found a book called Peter McWilliams' Life 101. And that book was the beginning of my journey to start to see things differently. I would say before that, I was absolutely a victim. And I was this person who felt like, why'd this happen to me? Why is my life so messed up now? And that book helped me start to reframe that life is about choices and that I have the ability to influence what happens next. The past doesn't equal the future. I mean, major concepts that I didn't know before I started to understand that it's up to me, right? And I can decide to change the course and I can learn and grow from this instead of fall apart. And so that really was the beginning of falling in love with personal development, professional development. And then I would say that fundamentally changed the course of my life. I probably wouldn't be talking to you today. I wouldn't have done the 20 years of transformation work that I've done. And I'm not even sure who I would have been if those things hadn't happened. So,
wow,
that's the short version.
I believe so much things happen. So, what was the first few steps you took when you put yourself out of that?
Oh my gosh, I think like the very first step was I remember thinking, I'm not the first person to go through really hard times. Generations of people have had to figure out how to improve, how to get better, how to turn it around, how to find the next level. And I can remember thinking, I should start to study this. Like, I don't even know what to do, but I'll bet you somebody's written about it. I'll bet you somebody's speaking about it. I'll bet you somebody's talking about it. So I didn't have any money. So I went to the bookstore because that was the cheapest way for me to, I would say, get new information, to just start learning something that could possibly help me. And then naturally, I was blind that there was this huge field of all these things like leadership development and personal development and organizational development. I didn't know about those things, but once I started reading, I was connecting the dots to those things and just started, I would say, voraciously consuming this information, because all of a sudden the light started to come on. I was not a victim who, sort of fell apart anymore. I was a person who felt inspired to reinvent myself. So just getting new information, right? I'm not the first person to struggle.
That's great. Wow, I love that story. So then moving forward in your professional career, like what were some of the pivotal moments that set you onto, I think you went through 4 industries, went through so many startups and big corporations. So what are the pivotal moments that for each transition?
Yeah. I think the first one was I was very young and I've always liked technology. And so I started my career in tech. And I grew up in poverty on the Eastern Plains of Colorado. My parents were kids having kids with high school education. So I didn't have a lot of exposure to sort of advanced learning and academics and things like that. So when I started studying technology, the first job I had was, a $40,000 job. And at that time, as a young kid who grew up in poverty, I was like, oh my gosh, this is a lot of money. This could be a great way for me to build this new life and this new career. And so I did a bunch of certifications and started going to school at night for an associate's degree. And I was just sort of voraciously consuming that technical credentialing side of life. And my career moved very fast. And I was working at a company called Qualcomm, which is one of the best digital companies in the country. And I loved it. And it was a great company, but something was happening at the same time. I had gone through this sort of existential moment in my life of what now and who am I now? And yes, I was figuring out the technology side of things, but those worlds were starting to collide in that technology wasn't enough to fulfill me. And so pretty quickly in my career, I figured out that tech is amazing and great, But the thing that I love even more than that is helping people achieve their potential. The idea that we can all be a better version of ourselves, and everyone, frankly, in my opinion, deserves the opportunity to have that kind of journey. And so I think those two worlds sort of smashed together. And after about 5 years at Qualcomm, doing great work, loved it, loved the company, but I just had this sort of burning desire to pursue this sort of development, leadership development, organizational development kind of track. So I quit. And I'm sure my parents were like, oh my gosh, this is one of the best companies. You're making great money. You have tremendous career track in front of you. You know, I was an IT engineer and project manager there. And I think they thought I lost my mind. So, but I quit, and I started to voraciously go through a bunch of personal development and leadership development courses. If any of the listeners have ever heard of Tony Robbins, I did the entire Tony Robbins track, all through the training courses and then into the leadership courses, and went back to serve at those events. And then I did a whole neurolinguistics track for years. So there was this kind of deep dive for a period of 4 years into personal development and leadership development. And then I started adding on the academic layer, which was going back for my bachelor's and my master's in the work. And I think it was clear to me at that point, something that I think is really pivotal is inside of organizations, people have a subject matter expertise, and you can only go so far with subject matter expertise. And then at some point you have to be able to be happy hitting that ceiling, or you have to be able to build bridges between the business and technology at higher levels to help the organization evolve as we go through technical disruption. And I think I saw early versions of that because I was working in tech during the .com explosion and when the internet was exploding, and I got to see the business really wrestle with taking their old traditional products and start moving them onto the internet. And so that was very pivotal. And I started to blend the two worlds, which was like what you said, a kind of an epiphany or milestone moment for me of, wait a second, it's not a dichotomy. It's not two separate things. I can take my love for tech and my love for development and leadership and put these two things together in a really interesting and exciting way. And so that's how I started to curate my career and really blend, I would say my skill set is at the intersection of leadership, learning, culture, innovation, and transformation. And I think a lot of people would say, oh, those are different disciplines. And I would say today, right now in this world, those disciplines are hyper relevant as a blend, because there's so much technical disruption while people are going through massive change, while leaders are having to figure out how to lead in a very, very different world. So it's kind of serendipitous. It wasn't like I had a crystal ball, but it was really cool how my path ended up right now in this world sort of being hyper relevant. So.
Yeah, I love that. I think a lot of our audience and a lot of my clients are also making this transition from being great employee, worker, experts in certain area and become a manager. Then next level is from manager to a real inspiring leader.
Yes.
And probably right now, like everything going through the disruption, huge transformation. So I wonder if you could share some insight, like what's the big, or say the critical steps someone transitioning from a manager into leader? What's the difference? How you become a leader, not just a manager?
Well, one thing's for sure is you don't trip over a rock and become a leader. And I think leaders haven't done a good job of creating the pipeline for employees and managers to become leaders. So to your point, there's a couple of really big differences. One is managing typically is more focused on things, and leading is more focused on people, particularly people leadership. However, there's a huge disclaimer here. You do not have to have direct reports to be a leader, to believe that you're a leader, to behave like a leader, and to study leadership. And I think the world has never needed more leadership than we need today. So I highly encourage everyone, regardless of whether you have direct reports, to just start to study the craft of leadership. It will massively enhance your career. You'll be able to do things at a much higher level, perform, think, strategize at a much higher level, just because you're starting to study the core skills of leadership. So I think one of the biggest things about it is, do you like people? And do you really want to help people? Because I think the best people leaders, to them, it's about developing people and helping them achieve their potential so that they can go on to do great things. I don't think that leaders who see people as an object or as a transaction do well. And I'll even take it one step further to say leaders who get stuff done, but leave bodies in their wake, like hurt the culture and damage trust and psychological safety, that's not leadership, right? To me, it's not even, you can't even consider that leadership. Yes, you may have got the project delivered. Yes, you may have delivered it on time, but the damage that was incurred through the culture is not worth the result. So a true leader, in my opinion, one, really enjoys people, wants to help them become the best version of themselves, and helps to move the organization forward. And the mark of a great leader is someone who helps people rise and go do great things beyond them. I think anybody who tries to hold people back, again, to me, is not leadership. So that's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah, I love how you, actually, I think the succinct way to sum up what you just said was manager focus on things, leader focus on people. I think that's a great summary.
Yes. Well, and honestly, everything we want, need, and hope to create comes through people. Like, think of the paradox we're in right now where the world's racing towards digital, right? Consumer preferences are more digital than ever. Everybody has this supercomputer in their pocket, which has more power than all the computers in history in our pockets 24/7, 365. And everybody's starting to experience the digital reality and spend a lot of their time in a digital reality. Now, whether that's good for us or not, we'll set that conversation aside. It's undeniable that there's this question of what it means to be human now. Again, who am I in this new digital world, and what does that mean for my skills? And I believe that kind of the true test of leaders right now is to give people purpose and sort of development and certainty that you matter. The reason why we build all these technologies is because of you, us, the human beings. And we're trying to make life better for each other. So I'm going to hyper care about you and develop you so that you can remain relevant and we can all win together while we experience this kind of new world of digital. And I genuinely believe that everything that we want, need, and hope to create comes through the head, heart, and hands of our people. Even if you have the best tech in the world, the coolest AI, whatever, it can only take you so far without the people. You need the people. So that's why I'm so invested in, especially now, investing in people.
Yeah, and especially the digital and the people right now, in a funny time, we have spending the past 18 months more like hide behind the digital screen all the time.
Yes.
So as a leader who are focusing on people in this kind of disrupting time, how do we focus more on people, step beyond the digital screen here?
Yes, I think that's the right question. And the answer is that we're connecting as human beings, not as transactions. So right now on Zoom, you and I can go through the motions of being in a meeting. And we could go through the motions for 30 minutes, an hour, even an hour and a half, and not ever feel connected, not ever feel like there's some kind of purpose. There's a bigger picture here that we're all rallying around to be a part of, and that you actually care about me and that I care about you. It's entirely possible to have a digital connection where we look at each other and have none of that. I think great leaders right now, today, even in a Zoom, Microsoft Teams, WebEx world, will take time to connect, to ask you about you and your life. How are things going now? There's so much change going on. How's that impacting you as a person? Right? How are you feeling about everything that's going on? What barriers are in the way? What can I do to support? Even if it's just to listen, how can I best support you as we go through this together? How often should we be connecting? Because I think that kind of empathy level and layer, that compassion that people are going through an existential moment and maybe have lost family members, or maybe they have pre-existing conditions that are really difficult to deal with right now. I think leaders have to step beyond the transactional sort of mask of corporate to deeply care about a person. And I know there's this old narrative where people used to say in corporate, leave the personal at home, and, you don't talk about feelings at work and that sort of thing. And I think that a good leader would not say something like that right now. A good leader would say, I care about you. I want to know what's going on, and I want to help.
Yeah, and I love how you say it in such a vulnerable way. So now I want to have a little bit vulnerable moments. So during the pandemic, what was the biggest challenge you were facing as a leader?
Oh my gosh. There's so much that went into this. I'm actually going to give you a little snippet of before the pandemic, so there's context for what happened in the pandemic. So in August of 2018, we're at a hackathon. I'm a vice president of strategy and innovation in a global asset management firm, 60-year-old global asset management firm. And we hear that we're being acquired. And so the organization right in that moment, imagine being at an event that's a wonderful event where you're creating the future, and all of a sudden all the employees are looking at their phone and going, what does this mean? We don't have jobs anymore? Am I gonna have a job? It's like it took the air out of the room. That from that moment forward, we were in the due diligence of an acquisition with another large global asset manager. And what happened is it fundamentally changed the organization. And all of us senior leaders were working diligently to protect the culture while there's a massive infusion of stress, uncertainty. I mean, with cortisol, right? Biochemically, the body fills with cortisol, which is fear, right? And so we had to do everything we could just to keep things moving forward and keep a sense of connectivity and community and purpose while we didn't have a lot of information, right? We didn't know exactly what was going to happen. Well, in short, on May 25th, 2019, our organization ceased to exist. 60-year-old global asset manager gone. Now consumed by another larger global asset manager. And it fundamentally affected the entire organization. Many people left. Many people went over to the new company. And that was a very, very difficult moment. And you might be thinking, well, how does that apply to the pandemic? Well, I stayed on with the new company for 9 months. And I flew 100,000 miles to 3 continents to lead a global culture integration for the new company. When I got back, I did a data-driven approach, created a culture dashboard. And when I got back, I presented it to the CXOs about here's the nature of the culture and the sentiment of the people after going through this acquisition. Data-driven approach, I want you to have it. And they said, well, this is wonderful. We haven't had anything like this. Will you consider moving and joining us at our headquarters, which was in another state? And I said, no, thank you. I'll take my severance because my whole family is here in Colorado and I wanted to stay close, especially with my young kids. And so as I received my severance, I walked out into a pandemic. So I was in all this massive amount of change. My whole world was uncertain for years. And I thought, well, I'm going to go get another great job and go back to work. No, that's not what happened at all.
Unbelievable.
I was very grateful that I had this severance because that gave me a financial buffer. But within the first week of the COVID-19, the schools closed and the kids came home. So I looked at my wife and I go, this is really lucky that I got this severance and that I'm available right now, because she works full time too. The kids were home with no school. And all of a sudden the school says, we're going to try to run digital school. And it was triage at best. So I became husband, father, part-time teacher while I was looking for a job. And that's when I realized, so in the short, I was looking for work while I was doing that. And the jobs were disappearing. Like I was talking with Amazon at one point, and the recruiter called me and goes, we're pulling all our positions just because we don't know how long this is going to go on and what's going to happen. And so in terms of impacting me, my whole world changed. I was no longer an employee of a large organization, a senior leader. I was dad trying to teach at home while I was trying to find work. And so I just said to my wife, I'm going to start a consulting firm and get out and do the best work I can do and speak and podcast and consult and coach while I'm trying to do this part-time work at home. And that honestly has been my 2 years, right? It's just been this sort of do the best you can with what you have, deeply care about your family, be there for those when it matters most, but also recognize sort of all bets are off, which I know is, what you went through and what everybody went through. It just changed everything.
So was there a magic moment of silver lining of all this thing?
Yes. And I have the number on my board, 195 days. So I did the math on this. This is so I think there are a lot of silver linings in the pandemic. One of them is I've been a more present and loving husband and father because of this. I've been working, I've been commuting, and on my board to the left of me is a sticky note where I did the math. Get this, 2 to 3 hours per day commute is what I was commuting when I was going to that job for 6 years. 5 days per week, 780 hours per year is 4,680 hours, right? Over 6 years. And that is 195 days. So just for a second, for anyone who commuted pre-pandemic, do the math on how much of your life you've spent in commute. And I just got all that back. I haven't been in an office since 2019. I get to be here for my kids and my wife and just be present in a way that I could not be before. And I don't even think I was awake to the magnitude of how much I was gone and how much that impacted the family. Now, I know anyone reasonable will go, yeah, but you have to have a job. You have to pay the bills. You have to do the stuff, right? Yes. And if we all just step back for a moment as leaders and say, is this what we should be doing with our people, to our people? Or could we make better decisions to give people more time with the ones that they love? I'm looking at that silver lining going, we can do better. People don't need to be commuting for 195 days. That's insane. Anyway, that's my silver lining.
Yeah, I love that. I think this 2 years really gave many of the opportunity to reflect on things we were neglecting for so many years. And when people are focusing on all the negative news, actually, we need to focus more on what is the positive gain we're getting from this pause, from this moment of reflection. So how do you see the leadership going to change forward with all the lessons we learned in the past 2 years?
Oh my gosh. So I believe that this is a threshold moment for leadership in general. This is my personal opinion. Anyone can feel free to disagree, but the third decade of the 21st century is bringing more change than the previous two combined. This decade, we will see more change than the last two combined. So how can you make a statement like that? Well, if we just step back for a minute and look at it from a macro view, it's undeniable. We have a global pandemic that's not going away, fundamental disruption, which has opened doors that have never been opened before. For example, the optics, how it looks to radically transform a company, has never been more green light. It's never been more acceptable to automate, to digitally transform, to completely reinvent your business model, to create new business models. It's amazing and radical, but what that does is it impacts people. That's just the beginning. Look at technical disruption. We're in a new era of intelligent technology, right? So artificial intelligence is starting to reshape a lot of industries. All of that is starting to cause fee compression and consolidation, which means merger and acquisition. So now you're seeing companies trying to navigate the storm by combining resources. That's on top of remote work, which is fundamentally redefining, should we even ask people to come into work? Well, it's not really safe right now, but what if it were safe? Does it even make sense anymore to have everybody coming in? That's changing real estate. How much real estate do you need? Should you be paying for all that real estate? What's your travel and expense budget? Do you even need that anymore? All of that is sitting on the back of this conversation of data is the most important resource in the world. How are you reinventing your organization to be a data-driven organization so maybe you can monetize your data or certainly have an asymmetric advantage, right? This is all creating new winners and losers. And then we see the emergence of the Great Resignation. So leaders, just for a second, on that alone, I don't think there's anybody who would reasonably try to argue that leadership is going to look like what it used to look like before. It can't. The world has changed too much. And so there's this saying of a mind expanded can never regain its original form. It's not possible. You've seen the future now. We can't go back to who we were in 2019. So leaders, my invitation to you is it's time to lead differently. I think there's two types. This is a gross generalization, but I really believe it's something we need to take a serious look at. There's traditional leaders who are hanging on to the past, and there's future leaders who are co-creating the future with their people. I get none of us have a playbook, right? Nobody has all of the answers. Totally understand that. But to partner and collaborate with a customer-driven approach where you're experimenting to create the future is, to me, the way. And I think that people who try to sort of go, well, let's get back to who we were, and I'm going to keep leading the way I used to because that's all I know. I think that's a very dangerous path. And it's a path that at some point, well, it's the journey to obsolescence. At some point, you're going to run out of road if you take that path. So that's kind of my soapbox.
Leading in the Great Resignation, that's a totally different challenge.
Yeah.
So what do you see as a kind of training or coaching help leader would need at this moment?
Yeah. So one of them is the good work that you do and the good work that I do, which is to care about the leaders. So it's not fair to ask people to lead through something they've never led through before and just wing it. We as people developers need to go, this is our time to shine. Leadership development, culture development, professional development, organizational development. It is our time to come in and help these people start to build new skills, future skills around what it means to be a great leader in a new world. For example, the era of fix and tell, command and control is long gone. And we are now into an era of empathy, right? And thoughtful listening, of partnership and collaborative, transparency and authenticity. I mean, these are completely different styles of leadership. And it's uncomfortable sometimes for a leader to go, well, all I know is command and control. How the heck am I supposed to be authentic and transparent? Well, you learn it like any skill. Anyone can develop this. The question is, do you want to? Now, on top of that, I think there's something else that's different. In the past, leaders have been largely functional leaders, a domain leader. For example, let's use something common like sales or accounting or legal. It's a domain, and a leader can sort of get good in that domain. Unfortunately, today, the world is changing so fast. In my opinion, leaders have to start to understand multiple domains. For example, let's say you know that accounting or sales, but you also start to understand strategy and digital and culture. Because those things are changing so fast, to be an inspiring leader, you have to expand your scope of what you can understand, articulate, and lead. So I think it's calling all leaders to sort of get outside of their comfort zone and begin a journey, a very personal journey of change for themselves so that they can show up better for their organization. Culture is the output of leadership behaviors. In my opinion, if you don't work with the leadership to find their next level, it's going to be really hard to take a culture to the next level.
Yeah, I think the leaders, while like trying to perform as a job is one thing, but to be an inspiring leader, you are constantly looking for how do you improve yourself? How do you expand your expertise level? How do you lead the team better? How do you grow as a person?
Yes.
So also I'm curious for you, you have achieved so much, you have done so many great jobs. So what's your next summit? What's your next big dream?
It's to be in this. As crazy as that sounds, I love big change and big transformation. So this is the best time in history to do this work. So being in this, as I said before, I believe this decade is going to continue to bring huge waves of change. And so being in sort of the eye of the storm of how do leaders navigate this? How does an organization and a culture navigate this? And how do you give clarity and directional purpose, even when we don't know all the answers, to help people survive and thrive into this next version of what is life and work? So I feel like this is it. This is the sweet spot for me. And I'm just loving that. In full candor, I'm also developing as fast as I can in the same way. So I'm looking at all of this going, okay, what are the next skills for me? What are the future skills for me? And where should I target my development right now so that I can create the greatest impact I can create in this time? So I just want everyone to know you're in good company. I'm learning like crazy too, trying to keep up. I was telling Lei, I just finished an IDEO course. IDEO is a big design firm, very creative organization. And they have an entire university called IDOU. This is not a shameless plug for them or anything. I'm just letting everyone know that I had a great experience learning, doing a certification called business innovation and blending sort of my people work with how to think strategically about how organizations are rapidly transforming in a human-centered, heart-centered approach. So had a great time with that certification. I only finished that a week ago. So.
Yeah, Nate, you definitely is my role model. You're like non-stop learning, non-stop transforming yourself. Yes. That's how you can help the organization to make all the transformations.
But Lei, to your point that you just said kind of the ultimate pearl of wisdom right there is this idea of nonstop learning. Learning is life now. Learning is the path. Learning is the way. And when things are changing really fast, we get a lot of comfort and certainty when we seek to understand, we learn, and we grow, right? We start to feel really afraid when we feel out of sync with what's going on. So I think thematically, if you look at the stories I've shared in this podcast through my life, I've had to reinvent myself a lot, many times. And so I'm kind of, taking what you said and giving it back to the audience to say, it's okay to reinvent. It's okay to learn new things. It's very enjoyable and fun and comforting to sort of find the next version of yourself so that you don't get left behind. And hopefully people can, rather than be afraid, grab on to, it's okay. Get in the water. Everybody else is in there too, right? We're all trying to figure it out.
Yeah. And I think that is exactly what we talk about, like the growth mindset. It's like, it's okay to admit that I need to learn something. I need to improve on something. I just like my team, they need to, because as a leader, we come and say, oh, my team need to improve on this and that. At the same time, it's okay to admit that we need to improve on something. We need to learn. Then you're inspiring your team to grow together.
100%. That I call that modeling the way. So people don't follow people who try to tell them what to do. They follow people who inspire them. And leaders who say that out loud, which is what you just said, I need to learn and grow. I don't have all the answers. I'm trying to figure this out too. that's very welcoming. That's inviting. That's kind of like, come with me, we'll go together, as opposed to what you said, a leader who goes, you guys need to get better. You guys need to change. Well, there's nothing there to be inspired by. So starting with self, leaders, if you're courageous enough to be vulnerable and say, I'm learning too, here's what I'm working on. What are you working on? Let's do it together and we'll all get better together. That's the way.
Yeah, that's a goal here. And also, I just shamelessly plug in my 5-week program, which I think leaders, one thing is, you need to learn something, you need to develop yourself, develop your team. On the other side, don't think that will take forever. It's possible to achieve a lot in very short time because your team can't wait on you. They need your leadership right now, and you want to see the result fast. So I encourage you to reach out to me for the 5-week intent program. We'll hands-on do the implementation. You're going to see result really fast.
That's awesome. And thank you for doing that, because I believe there are not enough people sort of helping. There's not enough support. I don't even think there could be too much for what's going on right now. But one question I have for you is there's adding new skills, and sometimes there's letting go. Sometimes leaders need to let go of some old things in order to become the next version of themselves. So I kind of wanted to ask you, in your program, do you focus on kind of both sides of that, of, hey, sometimes in order to achieve the next version of ourselves, we have to let go of some of the stuff that was holding us back?
Yeah, definitely. I love that question, because to make room for new things, you have to make room by letting go of some of the old things. So we, as a leader, you normally step into a leadership role with some expertise. You are the domain expert, you are authority in some area, but sometimes you need to delegate. You need to allow the next generation leader to grow, give them space, let them grow that expertise. You don't have to hold on to that. And you can focus on more on the people, how to inspire them to become the best they can become. Then your whole team is a winning team.
Absolutely. I love that. Get out of the way and make some space. And I think that's what great leaders do, is create a pathway and lift people up. So love it.
Thank you, Nate. I love the conversation we had. Unfortunately, we're running out of time soon. So please just quickly tell people, how do they get in touch with you if they want to learn more about you?
Yes, absolutely. I think the best way is LinkedIn, because that's where I'm the most active and where I think, I prefer to be connected with. So check me out on LinkedIn. Healthy Disruptor is the handle that I go by with all of my social and general. In general, that's Healthy Disruptor. And then, in general, just reach out, send me a message, and be happy to chat.
Thank you, Nate. I look forward to following you and seeing how you're inspiring more leaders.
Thank you for listening to Journey with Lay. What's your most valuable takeaway from today's episode? What is one step that you are inspired to take? Start tapping into your power of excitement and become the leader you are always meant to be. If you dare to dream it, you can achieve it. Go to journeywithlay.com or email hello@journeywithlay.com. We'll see you again next week.